I don't want to leave it too long because I want to be able to do everything. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll start our presentation. Okay. Roisin, you might give me a thumbs up. That's shown, yeah?
Yeah, looks good.
Perfect. Okay, so as I said, this is our Green Skills Week. We had some feedback last year when we did some questionnaires with our students and teachers around the country, and our secondary schools said that they would like to do something like this. So they gave us a couple of topics that they wanted to learn about, and facilitation came up as one of those topics. Now, facilitation for me is a massive thing, so I narrowed it down to facilitation skills. But if you have any questions that I don't cover today, be sure and ask away at the end, and we can have a little chat about it. So again, you're all very welcome, and we are recording this session as well. So yeah, we'll be sharing it afterwards. So just a kind of introduction of what we're going to do today. I'll introduce myself and where I've learned about facilitation. I'm going to talk a little bit about communication, which is key to our facilitation, methods and mediums of how we would present to people or how we facilitate. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to look at an approach called the Apple approach, which is an approach that I learned when I was in college. And I think it would be something that you could apply to any kind of facilitation work that you're doing. Even the teachers could apply this. I'm sure they have some knowledge in this area anyway. And then in my look at that, I'm gonna come up with a toolkit. So some of the things that I use when I'm facilitating and talk about those. And then we'll have time at the end for a Q&A. Or as we said, if you want to pop questions in the chat the whole way through, we can come back and have a look at those as we're working on the slides. Okay, so just a little bit myself. As I said, my name is Rob Nelson. I work with Green Schools, and most of my work, about 60 to 70% of my work, is facilitation work. So I do things like teacher seminars, webinars, online and in person, and with a mixture of different groups. So I work with secondary schools, I work with primary schools, I work with teachers, I work with community groups, and I've even done webinars. Like this week, I did a webinar for our own staff. So my primary degree is in outdoor education and business. And that's key, I suppose, when it comes to facilitation, because most of outdoor education is facilitation, but it's facilitation in the extreme. It's like if you had to teach a class on the side of a mountain, and if something went wrong, that person that you're teaching is in a lot of danger. So you have to really work on your facilitation skills and your communication skills. So that's where this kind of idea came to me. A lot of my colleagues went on to doing things like teaching kayaking and working in adventure centers. I went on to do what they would consider the softer skills, which is more this communication and the interpersonal skills. I worked in community work for youth work and community work for a long time. And after that, I did a master's in community development. Again, you're talking communication, but it's communication on multiple levels. So you have to be able to talk to the young people that you're working with, but you have to be able to talk to the organizations you're getting the funding from, and you have to be able to understand where the government and the funding is coming from. So it's at every different level. And then more recently, I suppose I've done certificates in Train the Trainer, which is a facilitator training course, and it's open to everyone. I highly recommend doing it. It's a great thing to stand out on your CV when you're looking to get jobs. I also did volunteer management, and I've got coaching certs in GAA, in rugby and in soccer and in multiple different things like surfing, kayaking, and all that as well. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is I've been learning about facilitating for most of my working career. So I'm trying to say I have a little bit of knowledge around this, and I'm happy to share it. So as I said before, communication is key to facilitation. And I'll correct that by saying two-way communication is good facilitation, because it's not just what you're saying. You have to understand that people are listening to it. So you have to understand that there's someone on the other side of it. It's important to note that 7% of meaning in communication is through spoken word. So it's not just what you're saying, it's how you're saying, how you use your voice, your tone, even the speed at which you speak. And then the other thing to consider is body language, which is 55% of what you're communicating. And if you think for a second, take your time and just think about a facilitator that you admire or a teacher that you admire, and think about what they look like when they're talking to you and how that comes across. So if you are going in to talk to a class, you have to look like the leader and the facilitator there. So for example, I have my logos on here today. I have my backdrop. It's all telling you I'm Green Schools. I'm the person speaking. Yeah. If I was in talking at an event, I would bring my little ID card and I'd have that, and it tells you this is the person that you need to listen to. So being in the proper attire, having the right body language is very important. So what we say is incredibly important, but as I said, body language is very important as well. As a facilitator, we also need to be aware of the spoken word, the tone that we use, and most importantly, the body language for those who facilitate. Okay, so in terms of method and medium, we have a huge number of options, actually much more options than I had when I was growing up. You have available to you. We can facilitate in person. We can facilitate online. We can use props to demonstrate what we're doing. And sometimes that's a really good way of illustrating something. For example, when I go and I talk about trees, I bring two big blocks and I'm able to show the rings to the school. And then you can say a lot about it by just showing them, this is how you age a tree. This is what each of these things mean, and use tools that are available to you to do that. We can use things like Teams, we can use things like Zoom, we can use things like PowerPoint, we can use presentations, videos, social networking, whatever tools you want to use. They're all very important, but the message is what's key. So however you choose to put our message across, you need to have a method to ensure what you are communicating is received and understood. So you have to have that feedback in there. You have to know and you have to observe. You can't be just standing behind something and not looking, because you'll see, and teacher probably has said, there's glazed eyes in this class. Yeah. Well, that means that they're looking to see if anyone is listening, and they will, as a facilitator, react to that. So they might react by stopping the class and saying, or is everyone listening? Or I had a particular maths teacher who used to decide to come in and open all the windows to wake us all up. There are lots of different methods to getting that engagement. I'm not suggesting you do either of those, but just to understand that your message is one side of it, but actually the people that are receiving it is another. So you have to keep an eye on their body language and their tone in questions they ask, and even if they're paying attention. So I said I'd talk about the Apple approach, which is something I learned in college, and it's a circular approach. So first we assess, then we plan, we prepare what we're going to deliver, we lead that, so we facilitate, and then we evaluate. So it's a 5-step program that's in a loop, feeds back. So once we evaluate, then that leads us into assessing for the next time. And hopefully there will be a next time. Each time you facilitate, again, you look at the evaluation from the last one, and that can be evaluation based on what you actually delivered, but it also can be an evaluation on yourself of how you facilitated, how you led that group, and the learnings you take from that. So we'll talk through each of those steps. And the first is to assess. So you need to know things about your group that you're working with, or even the event that you're doing, whatever it might be, whatever you're facilitating, you need to know things before you start making your plan. And that's the assessment. It's what? What are you facilitating? What's the message? What outcome do you want? It's how. How do you facilitate? So you could be online, it could be on person, it could be workshops, it could be presentations, it could be uh, events, it could be any sort of thing like that. After that, it's not going for me, we look at where. So where is very important, and the setup of a room. If you're going into a classroom, do you want it to be like a classroom space? Do you want it to be a communal space? Is it going to be outdoors? Do you want feedback, or are you standing at the top of the class and telling people, or are you having a communal group where they're talking together? You can use online, you can use things like Zoom meetings, you can do a webinar style like this, where there's less I'm presenting to you, or you could do it where it's more free for all, where you have a lot of people coming and having a chat online. There's lots of different ways to do that. So the where is the space. It doesn't have to be an actual physical space. It can be a space online either. And does that space have the facilities that you need? So if you're going to use props, is there space to use that? Is there a projector if you need that? Is there a flip chart? So you need to think about those if you have them in that space, if you have to bring them with you, that all comes part of your planning. Um, and having alternatives in case they don't work. I have been in front of 300 people where my computer didn't work, where my projector didn't work, where my backup computer didn't work, where I didn't have a flip chart with me, and I had to speak. So you have to know what you're talking about, be able to adapt to the situation. A lot of people would have walked away from that, but I knew the subject matter inside out, so I was happy enough to stand up there with just a mic. Not everyone would be. So just to be aware that not to rely on your technology, but to have it there as a backup. It's not the message. It doesn't have to be really clean and crisp. It's the message that's coming from you that matters. And then when. So a time, a date that suits both you as a facilitator, but also your target audience. And you'll notice I'm going to use terms that are very specific, I suppose, to communications in advertising and stuff like that, because actually advertising has driven communications and the skills that we use for a long, long time. So something like target audience, all that means is the group that you're talking to. And you need to consider that, because if you're going in as a secondary school student into a primary school, then you want to consider, well, are they going to understand the words I'm using if I'm talking? So you might have to think about plain language. If you're going in as a student to a community group, you might think about it in a different way. If you were going into a board of management, then you would have to think about how you look. You might put on a suit and look that little bit tidier, uh, because that's the way that they would go into their group. So you're trying to bring yourself to the same level and act as a peer. So you're communicating to them on their language. So that's what target audience means. And then the who. So who are your target audience? What age are they? What level of pre-knowledge do they have on the message that you're given? So you can do that with a quick test. And as green schools, when we come in to do facilitating, say we were just talking about facilitating SEAI workshops, when we go in, the first part of that workshop is we assess the knowledge. So we talk and ask a few questions about energy, and we see where the students are. And by the answers that we get, then we know which parts of the workshop that we'll do with them and focus on for longer, and which parts we won't. So just having that little bit in start of your presentation or your facilitation is a good way to gain that knowledge. And then how many will attend? So I mean, that'll depend on what you're doing. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. Say if I was having an event, it could be small groups over the space of a whole day, or we could be talking at a grand assembly and it could be the whole number of schools. So you have to think about that. Prepare yourself mentally for it, but also prepare how you're going to get the message to that size of a group. So then we come on to our plan. So our first of our peas in the apples. And based on your assessment, you'll be able to come up with a plan for your event, your workshop, your presentation. You take into account all the learnings you had from your assessment process, and then you carefully plan your message. How will you deliver it? Who will deliver it? And when will you deliver it? So I always say it's best to have more than one person up there, and work together and spread the workload and have that extra person to be able to say, well, you come in and do this little bit, and then while they're doing that little bit, you can prepare yourself for the next bit. So it's always good to do that and bring in an element of group work, especially when you're working as a secondary school student. And take into account the setting. So whatever you want to learn, what way you want to teach, the layout of the room can make a huge difference. If I was going into a group of from outside into a group of secondary school students, I might change the layout of the classroom. So if I wanted them to do group work, I'd push tables together so they're sitting in groups. If I wasn't doing that, but I wanted everyone to be able to communicate, I might set up a ring of chairs so everyone can see each other. We're all on the same level. There's no one standing up the front that you all have to look at. Everyone is able to talk in that space. So the layout and the structure of your room is something to think about, and it's quite key. So for example, in-person presentations for junior cycle classes using PowerPoint presentations in room what, at what time, at what date, with teacher present. I mean, there's always going to be a teacher present when you guys are delivering. So I just put Timmy. I always say Timmy when I'm looking for an example of a name. Timmy will facilitate using a plan, the plan assembled, plain accessible language on his slides, communicate. The committee will take questions and answers afterwards, and the room has a projector. It has a teacher present that will help with setup. So all of the different things that we looked at in assessment, we have them all there. That's our plan. That's what's going to happen. When we have that plan in place, the next thing we do is we prepare. So we look at our plan of action. We let people know when it's on. You might need to take to book rooms. You might need to change the layout of the room, so you have to get in before the time to set up the layout. You need to prepare materials. So if you were using a flip chart, if you were using presentations, have the presentations ready to go. You need in advance, you have to look at those alternate options. So if the presentation isn't going to work, do you have a flip chart to go back on, or are you comfortable standing up there and talking instead? Or can you move rooms? So have that backup option as a plan. Sometimes things do go wrong. So be prepared to be able to speak about it without visual aids. That's probably one of the key things, I suppose. Prepare your message in advance. Think about the questions you might get asked. And in particular, if I was doing this and I was being assessed on it, I would actually write down the questions I would ask, and I'd give them to my friends and prepare the answers, and I would have them ask those questions, and then you know what questions are coming. Um, Maybe I shouldn't say that while teachers are possibly learning, listening as well, but it's a great way to do that. So go to your committee, say, listen, what questions are we going to be asked here, and prepare answers, and maybe have some of the other committee members ready to take those answers as well. Set out a timetable and always allow for overrun. So no matter how well you plan things will either start late or they'll overrun. So have that extra little bit of time in there. So nearly prepare it a 20-minute one for a 30-minute slot. and then develop your own facilitator's toolkit. So, what is a facilitator's toolkit, you might ask? We use as facilitators things like icebreakers, which is an exercise to intended to help members of the group begin the process of working together. So, depending on whether it's a new group you're dealing with or a class that's been working together for a long time, you might move from icebreakers to energizers there. And an energizer is looking at an activity that uses workshops and group work to bring the group together and give them energy ready for you to deliver your message. So it brings that alert and active element. Then you can use things like tasks, which is any piece of work to be done. You can do that as group work, or you can do it as individual work. It could be something like a feedback form at the end, or it could be a little bit of a discussion, a breakout table or something like that in the middle of your presentation and your facilitation. You have games, which are interactive activities designed to help participants work towards your end goal, so help them learn about your message. Breakout tables are those discussions in smaller groups, and it's important to keep track of what's happening. So either have the group feedback to you or have one of your committee members at each of those groups to take some notes and feedback as to what was discussed. Breaks are very important if you're doing long events or if you're doing long workshops. Bring in breaks in there. So usually if you're going over an hour and a half, you're okay. You're okay up to an hour and a half, but if you're going any bit over an hour and a half, work in even a 10-minute break in there. If you're going for the day, work in a lunch break into your doing. It can be very dense to facilitate for an entire day, so you have to work those things in. And things like a peace pipe. So if I was in a group where I had that circle and I wanted everyone to be able to communicate, but I want to set rules at the start that we don't want to talk over each other. We need to hear each other. So introducing something like a token, which you give to a person who's speaking, and once they've finished speaking, they pass it on to the next person, and only the person who has that peace pipe can speak at that one time. So that means everyone else is listening and we're getting our message across. So things like that are a great way to add to your toolkit. And the other thing is the layout. So I've spoken a little bit about this. You have a classroom set up where the teacher's desk, it's formal, it's up at the focal point up at the front. You could do something like circle of chairs, and that's more equal participation type thing. You could have set up for groups where you'd have like tables, and then the discussions happen around those tables. And then you can have things where, for example, as a facilitator, I will always move around. If I was in a position where I had unwanted behavior, think about it. If you're on the bus and you go down the back of the bus, you're going down the back of the bus to mess. Yeah. You're far away from the authority figure, and that means messing is going to happen. So if I had people that were talking all the way through my talk and I had a mic and I could move around, I might go and I might start talking next to those people, and because they're closer to me, they're going to talk less and they're going to stop messing. So have that in the back of your head as well. You don't have to deliver from the front of the class. In fact, sometimes it's better to move around. It keeps people on their toes and it keeps people from getting bored and having their own discussions. Okay. And then I suppose that leads into lead. Well, you have your toolkit, you have all your plan, you've done your assessment, you've made your preparations, and now you're ready to lead. So remember two-way communication. Remember that you want to look the part, and body language comes into it, and that's part of it. So dress to impress. What does a good facilitator look like? You know what you think a good facilitator looks like. Try and present that when you're in there. Stay calm. Remember to consider your tone of voice, how you deliver, keep a steady, clear speed. I find that difficult even after years and years of working in this area. I will increase my speed when I need to and when I feel like I'm under pressure to get all the information out there. But you can do that, but still deliver clear language. And part of that is your body language and eye contact with participants. So, I mean, that is a key thing. If you're looking directly at someone and you make that eye contact, then they're going to be listening to what you have to say. So watch the body language as well of all of the people that you're delivering your message to, and then engage with them when you think that you're losing the point. So if they're looking like they're glazed off, maybe change something in what you're presenting. Even bang the table to make your point. It can wake people up again. And then the last step in the Apple approach is to evaluate. So when you're working in groups, I think it's good to have someone separate that does kind of an observation, takes notes, both on how the group you're delivering to have learned and on how you work as a facilitator. Doesn't mean you need to be very critical of each other. It means you look back at the whole process with a critical eye. What could you do better? Did it work? What did work? What didn't work? Would you add in breaks? Would you introduce energizers at some point or not? Is that needed? All of these different bits add up to helping you learn to be a better facilitator. So having this self-assessment process allows you to learn, adapt, and grow as a facilitator. In a school setting, it can be a good idea to ask this type of feedback from teachers as well as your fellow students as well, because the teachers have been standing up and facilitated for years. So they all have their own little ways to do things. And for example, I had a teacher that really sticks to my mind. He delivered in the exact same tone the whole time. But if all you did was wrote down what he said after he said, and I'll say that again, then you were going to get every bit of information you needed from his class. So listen out for those things. Watch your own teachers, see how they deliver the class, and learn from the things that you like, and learn from the things that you don't like as well. Like, that's key. You don't want to have to model yourself exactly on them, but pick up the little bits that you like and keep them, and pick up the bits that you don't like and don't use those. So that's me. I know I blast through things. I go very fast. I hope that everyone got something from that. I'm gonna stop sharing, and if you have any questions, you can pop questions in the chat. Or I can stop recording if you want, and we can unmic and talk, or you can talk. We can stay recording. Any questions popping up? No. Anything in the Q&A? So we have a Q&A section and we have a chat section. Here, yeah, there's something in the chat there. So sorry, that was something about the Apple approach. I can't see the chat. Can you see it?
Yeah. So it says,
you want me to go back to the slide? To the start slide, is it? So, Apple approach, it's assess, plan, prepare, lead, and evaluate, right? And it's in a cycle. So we assess. From our assessment, we look at what we need. We may come up with a plan. Then based on our plan, we need to prepare all the materials and bits that we need, our classrooms, all that. then we go into our lead, then we go into an evaluation. And that evaluation can be done by our self-evaluation. It can be done by giving feedback to the group, so you're getting feedback from the group. It could be done by getting one of the other members of your committee to do a kind of observation feedback. And all the better, if you can add all those three together, then you're going to get more learning from it. So I won't go through all of these slides again. We will have this as a recording, so you can watch it back, and I can definitely share the slides in the chat for you to download now if you want. But yeah, so I mean, the assessment is looking at what, how, it's looking at where, it's looking at when, and it's looking at who. So you're looking at all of those different questions, and you have a little bit to do on each of those. Then you're making a plan based on what you learned from your assessment on how you're going to deliver your message, what your message is, and where and when. You prepare based on what you need. So if I was doing a PowerPoint, I'd have to have my PowerPoint ready, but I'd also have to have a projector. I'd have to know that the projector is in the room that I'm going to deliver it in. All of these different considerations you have to make in your preparation. You have to prepare yourself to give that, so know your message inside out, and you have to look at how you're going to look doing it as well. So your body language and who you're delivering it to makes an important role. I can come in my uniform, that looks very effective. I could, if I was going into uh, uh, some senior level people in the school, I might dress up, put a suit on, or I might put on a nice dressy skirt on and go in and give that talk to them. You're looking at what level you're delivering to. The facilitators tools kit is there. You can read through that again. All of these different things that you pick up and you might see a teacher or a facilitator do, and how you can use that to best illustrate your message. And then your leading is delivering it. So whatever way you do that, but it's important to evaluate that deliver and to let that feedback in what you're doing. I hope that was it. That was a flashback through what we did. I hope that helps. I will pop into the. Can I share on this? I don't know if I can. We'll send out links to anyone who's registered with a copy of a PDF and the link to the workshop, so you can have a look back over it. Is there any other questions? What kind of language should you use with younger people? So, great question. So I have always been one to promote what we call plain language. So what I would say is don't overcomplicate things. And unless you know that the group is pushing it. So if I was in a sixth class, I might use the same language as I was using in secondary school. But if I was going into a junior, imagine if you were talking to a 10-year-old and use the language that they feel they'd understand. So instead of using a big complicated word, just put in that smaller version of the word, and you can use that by going to imagine what you were like when you were that age and what you'd understand, or you can just go to a thesaurus and look for the explanation of what that word means rather than using the word. If that makes sense. It adds words to what you're saying, but it means that it's a communication that's understood at both levels. So we call it plain language. And if you just Googled plain language version of, then you should be able to get an explanation there of what that is. Yeah, and it's probably the best way to do it, even if you're talking to an older group. Just don't overcomplicate anything. You want to remember that you're trying to get your message across to as many people as possible, in that it's understood by as many people as possible. So the simplest language that you can do that is the best way to facilitate. If you overcomplicate things and someone has to use a dictionary to understand what you're saying, then you've already alienated half of the people that are there. And that means that they're gonna go away and say, well, this is not worth my while. I have something else in the chat here. What if you were addressing 6 different year groups? What would be the best language? Plain, simple language. Um, yeah. What's your message? What's the easiest way that message can be understood and put it as simple as possible? Now, I wouldn't say don't shy away from using scientific words. If the word is very specific, then use it because sometimes there's no substitute for that word. So if you're talking about scientific things, if you were saying talking about climate change and you came across a word that there isn't really an explanation other than using that word, use that word. But then maybe say, you know, if you have any questions about what that means, try and bring it back to a universal language. So something that everyone will understand. Or have a list of terms that we'll use. So if you were doing an invite to people, we might use this term. This is what we mean when we're talking about it, and have that there, a glossary of terms. You can definitely do that on a presentation if you're sharing a presentation, but you can also do it on the back of an invitation if it was a big event or if you were doing a big assembly. So this is what I mean when I say climate change. This is what I mean when I say sustainable development. A lot of these words have misunderstandings, so we nearly have to say that if we want to be an effective facilitator, we have to say this is what I mean when I use this term. If you say that at the start, then every time you use that term, the people who you've said it to know that that's what you mean. Especially when we talk about things like sustainability, because you could ask the entire room that you're in now, what does sustainability mean? And say there's 20 people there, you might get 20 different answers. And if you ask them tomorrow, you might get 20 different answers again. So always have a glossary of terms of what you mean, and you can add that to your notes when you're working. So if you think that people are understanding it, that's fine. People will understand what they want to from your message as well. You have to take that into account. So plain, simple language where possible is the best way for whatever age group. Do we have any other questions? If not, we might let you all log off and enjoy the rest of your day. But I'll stay around if there's any questions. You're more than welcome to ask. I see some hands clapping, so I'll take that as a good sign. Thank you everybody for your time. And as I said, we will be sending out everyone who registered. We'll be sending out links to these webinars, so you'll be able to watch them back. And we can definitely send on a copy of the slides as well. You're very welcome. Thank you. I'm glad that you learned stuff. I was a bit worried. So thank you. Thank you for that, Anya. That's great feedback. I'll remember that and use it in my evaluation. Okay, we'll leave it there, Roisin, and say goodbye. I don't know if I can stop recording, can I? Yes.